So the sun might be sweltering hot, but at least we have some brand new books to look forward to. Hi everyone, my name is Holly, and in today's video I'll be talking about a ton of book releases that are coming your way in August. A bit of a rapid fire list as always. Of course, there are way too many books for me to include in this video, so be sure to let us know which books that you are looking forward to in the comments below. If you like this type of content, I do these every single month, so subscribe, join the fantasy cult. Let's go ahead and jump right on in. The first date that is kicking us off today is on August 2nd, which only has one release on my list that sounds very interesting, and that is The Book Eaters. And the story is literally what it's titled. We have Devon, who is part of a mysterious race of book eaters who rely on books for physical sustenance. She's on the run with her son, who is an even more rare mind eater who needs to feed off human minds instead of books. This sounds really innovative, and I think it's going to take a really interesting take on monsters. If you're looking for a dark take on supernatural creatures and twisted patriarchies, this one is here just for you. It also sounds like it'll scratch your genre mixing itch for fantasy, thriller, and even fairy tale. Moving on to August 9th, we have The Art of Prophecy. This is a release that is probably going to get a lot of people excited if you aren't already. Wesley Chu, the author who has quite a few hit books, is coming out with a brand new fantasy, first in a series all about this big important prophecy being torn apart. We have a few perspectives. We have Jian, the supposed chosen one who is destined to finally defeat the Great Khan of the barbarians that have been a continual threat to the central nation. We have Tiashi, his mentor, and then the third plotline is centered on one of the champions of the Khan's people. This sounds so rich and interesting. I love the twist on turning a prophecy into something no one expected to happen. A very unique take on the chosen one trope for sure. Glaciers Edge, if you're in the mood to sink your teeth into yet another Drizzt book, then you don't have to wait long because Glaciers Edge is coming soon. This is the sequel in R.A. Salvatore's new series called The Way of Drow. It is set in the Drizzt universe, which consists of almost like 40 books, I think, at this point. Of course, you don't have to have read all of them to enjoy this. In fact, I've heard this is a great entry point. You can start fresh with this trilogy. Just know Drizzt has a lot of backstory. This is highly recommended for people who love D&D and just a fun fantasy in general. The Monsters We Defy. This is an extremely beautiful cover that I think is going to fit the vibe of the story really well from what the synopsis tells us. It's a historical fantasy that weaves together African-American folk magic, history, and romance. The setting is Prohibition era New York, and the story follows Clara, a young woman who can see spirits, and she has made a deal with a demon. She joins together with others who have also made this deal, and they must carry out a dangerous heist. I know this comes out during the summer. I'm not like pushing you to wait to read it until then, but this honestly sounds like a really good fall read when like spooky historical fiction can fit right in. I'll be reading this one for sure. The Bruising of Quilla. This is a fantasy novella that's set in a world inspired by Persian mythology with the addition of taboo blood magic. We follow our protagonist who is a healer and is new to the city the story takes place in. Unfortunately, there is a strange disease sweeping through the community that indicates an untrained blood magic user is apparently experimenting with people. That concept sounds really interesting. It's also a very queer read, including the main character's brother who is transitioning in the middle of all of that chaos. So if you're looking to add a new diverse novella into your collection, definitely check this one out. And moving along to August 16th, we have The First Binding. There's always a big fantasy that is announced at the beginning of the year that everyone just hypes up and is excited about, and it appears everywhere. This one is one of those books. It is definitely one of my most anticipated books of the year. It's a South Asian fantasy debut that is being heavily compared to the Kingkiller Chronicles. With a very similar beginning, we have our protagonist Ari, aka the Storyteller, whatever that means, who is just chilling in a tavern, entertaining people with stories. He has abilities that include manipulating shadows and fire, but we do have several other narratives, as does any true epic fantasy should. It is a novel about coming of age, found family, kindness, empathy, storytelling, magic, truth and lies, and most of all, it is a novel about stories. And if you know any book lover, you know we love a book about books. So I think every reader is really excited about this one. The Drowned Woods. I have been dying to read more from this author after loving The Bone Houses, her previous novel, and thankfully we have this brand new YA fantasy coming from her. The story here is oriented toward Welsh mythology, which is very similar to her previous book as well. I believe it's a retelling, and I'm not familiar with it, but I am ready to be once I read this. It's a heist story at its heart, in the same way as like Six of Crows was. It follows a ragtag group of misfits, some with magic and some with not, on a quest to take down an evil king. It supposedly features a strong heroine, dark folklore, fey-touched fighter with a pet corgi. Say no more, add this to your TBR. Up next I have Goblin Markets. So for those of you who are looking to scratch that goblin itch, which we don't really get to see much in fantasy, which is oddly weird because goblin and fantasy is like a marriage forever to be betrothed to, but we don't see that often. This one will definitely do that for you. It's a spooky middle grade retelling of the Goblin Market tale following two sisters. We have Lizzie and Minka, who live on the outskirts of a small village. The two of them spend all their time together until Minka meets a mysterious man at the market, and upon eating the fruit that he offers her, she becomes enamored with him. And a few days after returning home, she becomes ill. Obviously setting up for the plot and mystery, definitely giving me some folklore fairy tale vibes, which is, there's a lot of that on this list. I love this cover, and it's actually what attracted me to it initially, and I am certainly intrigued. The Oleander Sword, the anticipated sequel to the Jasmine Throne, the Burning Kingdom trilogy continues with more godlike enemies, curses, and sapphic romance, of course. The story takes place soon after the first novel ends, about a year I believe, where both Milani and Priya are on the next steps of their journeys. Tasha Suri does a fantastic job bringing life to human bonds tested and broken by ambition, power politics, war, and the mingling of like supernatural forces in mortal lives. There will be a third book that you'll have to wait for, but if you haven't read the first book yet, it's a great time to jump on this train. The Warrior. This is a book that I have read and will be reviewing in a reading wrap-up video very soon, so be on the lookout for that. This is the conclusion novel to the Quest for Heroes duology. I'm sure you've heard of The Coward, its predecessor, which came out last year, that took classic fantasy tropes and really mixed them very well in lots of like action sequences. This conclusion takes us to a whole new location with brand new characters and new problems that can lead to either life or death. It's full of compelling storytelling and memorable characters, and now it's a completed series, so another you should have no problem questioning whether or not you should read it. I think you should. We have Babble. The day the world stood still was when this book was announced. The author who wrote the Poppy War series is back with a new dark academia standalone fantasy. Babble is the world center for translation and, more importantly, magic. And Robin Swift, one of our main characters, has been training for years in Latin, Ancient Greek, and Chinese, all in preparation for the day he will enroll. Robin then finds himself caught between Babble and the shadowy Hermes Society, an organization dedicated to stopping imperial expansion. I can already tell this book is going to be way too smart for me. I've started reading it, and what I've read has been incredible. There's really a huge focus on many things like race and academics, imperialism, language, and even like the magic system, which involves language and silver working. It's going to be yet another hit book from R.F. Kuang. No doubt about it. The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. This is a fantasy rom-com, and I've heard in passing it being described as Shrek meets Howl's Moving Castle, which tells me it's quirky and whimsical. We follow two characters, Mercy, who is an undertaker, and Heart, who is a marshal who hunts zombies. And he has to frequently deliver bodies to Mercy's struggling family business. Both of them hate each other, and they somehow begin sending each other anonymous letters, not really realizing who they're talking to, and of course fall in love. A lot going on in this one. There's even talking animals who work at the post office in the story, and I'm not totally sure what to expect, but this is definitely one to tickle a lot of your fancies, so I wanted to make sure this one was on my list. On August 30th, we have A Taste of Golden Iron. This is a book that is quite the looker in person, and I'm probably going to quirk your fancy even more when I tell you it's a slow burn queer romance fantasy. We have two main characters, I'm assuming the two handsome men on the cover, and I'm sorry if I get their names wrong. Kadau, who is a prince who has anxiety about running his kingdom, and then we have his no-nonsense bodyguard who gets assigned to him, and of course, they become the power duo of the century. And the story is also set in a matriarchal society, which sounds very interesting. We have some intense political drama thrown in the mix. All in all, a fantasy story which is quite the chunker, I might add, that the author seems like has done a lot with, and I'm excited to see what all of the hype is about. Belladonna. This is a YA fantasy from a pretty well-known author, and she's diving into a lush gothic approach with this story set in a Regency era. We're following Signa, who realizes she can't die, so she drinks poison to summon death because she needs his help to come into her powers and solve a murder. There is a lot of buzzwords to describe this book. We have a whodunit mystery, a coming-of-age story, and obviously it's featuring a very interesting duo with a beautiful distinct cover that you'll probably spot easily in the library or at your local bookstore. Definitely a story I think might be worth your time checking out. Stein Tingles by R.L. Stein. Yeah, I bet you haven't heard that name in a while. As a pure 90s kid, it's hard not to feel nostalgic for a book like this, but we get to go back to our Goosebumps roots and enjoy short little horror stories like we did as kids with this brand new short story collection. Each spooky story here has the creep factor Stein fans expect, with pacing and endings that shock and delight, but a little of silliness and cheese we can all kind of appreciate. It is summer too, so this would be like the perfect book to pass around a campfire. Hopefully nothing will get you while you're sleeping in your tent. The Spear Cuts Through Water. This is a new epic fantasy from the author who wrote The Vanished Birds, which was quite a hit when it came out, and this one seems to be on the same path as the rave reviews are trickling in. It's focusing on two warriors who guide an ancient god across a broken land to end the tyrannical reign of a royal family. But honestly, it sounds like so much more than that. It's so much more complex. It's an epic quest amongst strangers, set in a unfamiliar land with folklore woven into it, with a narrative structure that is dreamlike apparently, so that makes me think a little bit more on the whimsical side. Whatever the case, we can all just make our speculations for those of us who haven't read it. This cover is gorgeous. I think it's worth adding it to your wish list. Okay, so that is going to be it for my list of really exciting book releases in August in the genre of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. As always, thank you so much for watching. Let us know what you're excited about, what's going to get you running to your local bookstore when it comes out. We'd all love to know. Subscribe if you haven't already. I upload every single week and do these types of videos every single month to inform you what books should have your attention. So until we meet again, happy reading.